In this section of our overview of Photoshop, I'm going to go through layers, layer masks, and then clipping paths. All three of those things kind of fit in similar kind of categories. And I'll just run through what layers are and how they work, and then I'll explain how layer masks work. And then the last thing I'll go through is clipping paths. And clipping paths come into play when you're dealing with product photography and you're dealing with things like FMCG or the chairs that we did, etc. You want to be able to provide your client with an image of their product with a clipping path. So then your client can then take that image and then put their chair on whatever background they choose. They can put it in a float, like they can do whatever they want to do with it. Okay, first I'm going to go through layers. So let's have a look here. Here's one of the shots that we did for the Frangelico. Now, there's two images here that we want to put together. So you'll see that this here is, and I'm pushing F and Z, this here is our main image. But you see that gold there, how that's just not perfect there? We want to fix that. And we've shot a second image where we've put a mirror, and now that mirror has shone some light onto that there. So what we want to do is we want to take this and put it onto this here. So what we're going to do is have both of these the same size like that. Now I'm going to click on this one and drag it onto that. And now you'll see this image here has got two layers. There's the original, and there, if I turn the eye on, you can see the one that I've just dragged on. Now I want to line it up. Now you'll see how I've got a vertical and horizontal pink line. That tells me that they are lined up. And the only thing that's changing is the lighting on the bottle and the mirror. Now, the best way to do this is to add a layer mask. I'm not going to add a layer mask yet because I need you to sort of see how the layers work. So now, if I want to have the reflection from this image appear on that image there, those two layers, I can start to erase this image here. Okay? And whatever I erase from this image is going to disappear, and what I haven't erased will stay over that image. Now this is one way of doing it, but if I accidentally delete the bit that I want, I can push Command Z, but at some point I'm going to be past the point of no return. So the best way to do this is to add a layer mask. So there's my image. If I click on there, that adds a layer mask. If I push Command I, it inverts that layer mask into black. Now, by using my brush tool, if I've got black, it paints it in. If I've got white, it paints it out. Okay, does that make sense? So you switch between your brush of white and black by pushing X, and then you can add or remove. And this way you're not damaging that image in any way. You're working on the mask. So if we now zoom in and work on this section here, and if I've got my brush and I push X so it's white, I can then see this layer over that one. Now this brush is not the best brush to use. I need to change my hardness down. So now when I'm painting, it's a little bit more feathered, but you can see I probably want my hardness to be about 60% if I'm trying to get some sort of an edge there, right? But you can see how now by using my layer mask, I'm able to use the bit of that image that I want without damaging or erasing that image there. So this is what I'm seeing when I turn that on. All right, there we go. If I turn it off, that's that. So that's layers and layer masks. Now again, this layer, if I wanted to move that layer, for example, sorry, I'm moving the mask. If I wanted to move that layer, there it is. Right, so now we're moving that anywhere we want. Okay, let's go back to there. So that's layers and layer masks. Other times, what you might need to do is create something called a clipping path for your client. Now, I'm going to use an example of the stool that we photographed. If that was for a client, the client would want a clipping path with that image so they can then have the freedom to be able to cut out that stool and put it on whatever background they want. So here's the picture of the stool there. Now, we'd clean that up first and we'd get rid of any smudges and so on. Once we've cleaned it up, what we'd then do is want to select that image. Now, this is one of the big things that retouching, outsourcing your retouching, this is one of the biggest places it saves you time, because I'm going to grab the lasso and I'm going to start to work my way around this stool, right? And if I start to work my way around the stool, you can see how extremely time consuming this becomes. And you've got to get it right, and it takes a hell of a long time to do this. Okay, Command D, deselect. We've done this already and we're just going to load the selection. There it is there. There's the marching ants. So to select around this probably took 15, 20 minutes to make that selection. Or you ship it overseas and you pay 80 cents and they'll do it for you. Now, there's my clipping path. I would then, right click, layer via copy. So there's my layer. If I take my background off, there's my stool on its own. If I now create another layer underneath that one, and I'm going to push D to reset my swatches there, and G and X. X makes the white come forward. G puts my paint bucket. Now there's a white background. There's a clean white background. I would get rid of that background layer. I don't need it. There it is there. Okay. Now my selection, if I'm going to save this, for example, Command Shift S, and I'm going to save this as a PSD, save it, save it. If that's being saved as a PSD, that PSD is now 29 megabyte, okay? That's reasonable size. It's not massive, but it's a reasonable size, okay? The far more economical way to do this, and now if I save it as a PSD and I send it to my client, if my client doesn't have Photoshop, he won't be able to do anything with it. If I save it as a JPEG with a clipping path for my client, he's got a lot more freedom with it. And the way you do that is, you've got your selection. There's my selection, right? If in my selection, I right click and go, make work path, it's now in my paths window, it's made a path. If I click on that to save it, double click, path 1, okay? If I eliminate my white background and I go Command Shift S and I save that as a JPEG, save it as a JPEG, and now we'll just call it sample, save. If I go back here, that's it there as a JPEG. Instead of 29 meg, it's now 3 meg. Now my client can ship that around, email that around much freer than they would with a 29 megabyte file. Let me close this. And now let me open up this one and you can see how to extract that clipping path. So there's my Photoshop file, my JPEG sample file. The path is there. So when I click on the path, it shows me the line. You see that line when I put it? If I right click on this and go make selection, there's my marching ants. If I now right click on my marching ant selection and go layer via copy, there it is. Okay, there it is. I can now move that around and put that on whatever color background I want. Let's go green. If I push G, and I've created another layer and I'm putting green. There it is. That stool is now on green or pink or whatever it is. My client has the ability to now put his stool on whatever color he wants with very little fuss. So let me just go back to white. There it is. So having a clipping path or knowing how to create a clipping path allows you to be able to provide something to your client that's not massive in file size, but still allows them to have the freedom as if it was in a PSD. Now, again, doing this, we understand how we do it. We understand how to do it, but we outsource this because it is very, very, very time consuming to sit there and make a perfect selection around a chair or a stool or whatever your product is. I cannot stress enough how much better off you are to outsource this kind of work. But that said, like I said, you really need to understand the basics of it so you can then manage your outsourced company to do this. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you on the next one.